My name is Patricia Monroe, and I learned the hardest way that sometimes the people who say, I love you, are actually counting the ways they can destroy you. I'm a Black woman in my mid-40s now, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm telling this story because someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know that mothers aren't crazy when they sense danger. We're just paying attention to things the world teaches us to ignore. If you're listening to this story right now, drop a comment below and tell me where you are listening this from. This would help us build a strong community of story lovers. For 42 years, I was married to a man named Thomas. He wasn't perfect, no man is, but he was steady. Thomas worked in construction the same way his father did, and his hands were always rough, always capable. We had 2 children together, Marcus, my son, and Jasmine, my daughter. They were born 3 years apart, and from the moment they could walk, they were inseparable. Marcus watching out for his little sister the way big brothers do, protective and patient even when she was being difficult. Our home wasn't anything fancy. We had a modest 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, the kind where people knew each other's names and brought casseroles when someone was sick. The walls were painted a warm cream color that Thomas had picked out himself, and the living room had a worn but comfortable sectional where the 4 of us would sit on Sunday mornings, drinking coffee and reading different sections of the newspaper out loud to each other. That was our ritual. That was the texture of our ordinary life, the kind most people don't notice until it's gone. Thomas died when he was 58 years old. It was a heart attack, sudden, no warning, no goodbye. One moment he was at work, and the next moment he was on the ground, and then he was gone. I remember the police officer at my door, the way his mouth moved, but the words sounded like they were coming from underwater. I remember Marcus dropping his phone when I told him, the sound of it hitting the floor like the first crack in everything I thought was solid. I remember Jasmine. She was 25 at the time, already working as a marketing coordinator at a growing tech company, just sitting on the kitchen floor, not crying, just staring at nothing like the world had stopped making sense. For about 2 years after Thomas died, we moved through our lives like people learning to walk again. Marcus eventually took a promotion that required him to move to Atlanta, about 4 hours away. The company he worked for was growing and they needed him there, and I told him to go, to build his life, to not stay stuck in Charlotte because of me. He called every Sunday without fail. We texted throughout the week. He came home for holidays, but the dynamic of our small family had shifted. It was me and Jasmine now, in the house Thomas had built piece by piece, and we were both pretending we knew how to be okay. Jasmine threw herself into her work. She was good at what she did, marketing, branding, understanding what made people want things. Her company valued her, promoted her, gave her more responsibility. She started going to networking events, conferences, working late into the evening because the work was purposeful in a way that grief wasn't. I supported all of it. I was her mother. I was supposed to want her to succeed, to move forward, to build a beautiful life. That's when she met Devon. Devon appeared in our lives the way certain men do, smoothly, confidently, like he'd already figured out exactly what to say and how to say it. He was tall, with the kind of build that suggested he spent time at the gym, and he had a smile that showed all his teeth and reached his eyes in a way that made people believe he was genuinely happy to see them. He was a manager at a financial services company, educated, articulate, the kind of man mothers are supposed to approve of when their daughters bring them home. I remember the first time Jasmine mentioned him. We were in the kitchen, my kitchen, the one where I'd taught her to make Thomas's favorite biscuits, the one where we'd had 1,000 conversations that made up the scaffolding of our relationship. I met someone at work, she said casually, like she was mentioning the weather. His name is Devon. He's in the corporate development department. I was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, my hands moving in the familiar rhythm, the smell of garlic and ginger filling the kitchen. "That's nice, baby," I said, because what else do you say? "Soon," she said, and she was smiling, that smile that transforms a young woman's face, that smile that says she's thinking about someone else. "Maybe next week." "That's not weird," I said. I didn't know yet that I was blessing the introduction of someone who would change everything. Devon came for dinner on a Saturday night about 10 days later. I cooked, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the way Thomas had loved it, though I didn't tell Devon that. I baked a cake from scratch. I set the table with the nice tablecloths, the ones we used for holidays. I wanted to be the kind of mother who welcomed her daughter's boyfriend properly, who gave the relationship a chance, who wasn't the overprotective type that pushes men away before they'd even sat down. He brought wine and flowers, red roses, the kind that announce, "I am courting your daughter," in a language men have been speaking for centuries. He shook my hand firmly. He complimented my cooking before he'd even tasted it. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and I nodded, and we moved on the way people do. During dinner, he told us about himself. He'd grown up in Richmond, Virginia, the son of a banker and a teacher. He'd gone to a good college, was working his way up the corporate ladder, had dreams of being a vice president by the time he was 35. He talked about his goals with the kind of confidence that comes from believing the world exists to give you what you've decided you deserve. He made her glow. Marcus called me the next day. He asked. I wanted to tell him something was off. I wanted to say that there was something in the way Devon looked at Jasmine, possessive maybe or calculating, that made my skin feel too tight. I wanted to say that his compliments felt like inventory, like he was cataloging her best features for some reason that had nothing to do with love. But I couldn't quite articulate it in a way that made sense, so I said, "He seems nice." He was polite. "Good," Marcus said. "That's all that matters, right?" I didn't know then how much damage those words would do. Jasmine and Devon dated for about 8 months before he proposed. It was romantic in the way proposals are supposed to be. He took her to the place where they'd first met, in the lobby of their office building, and he got down on one knee, and he said all the right things about forever and partnership and building a life together. Jasmine called me crying with happiness. I cried too because that's what mothers do. We cry when our daughters are happy because we remember being that young and believing that love was going to be enough to protect us from everything. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, nothing too elaborate. Jasmine wore a white dress that she'd chosen carefully, spending hours at different bridal shops with her girlfriends. Devon wore a black suit and looked handsome and appropriately emotional at the altar. I walked her down the aisle because Marcus offered, but I was the one who needed to do it, who needed to place her hand in another man's hand and trust that he would take care of her the way Thomas had taken care of me. They moved into an apartment together in Charlotte, about 15 minutes from my house. It was a nice place, modern, clean, the kind of apartment that looks like a hotel you'd see in a magazine. Devon had decorated most of it, and it reflected his taste. Sleek furniture, neutral colors, everything organized and controlled. For the first few months of their marriage, everything seemed perfect. Jasmine would visit me for lunch on Saturdays, and she'd be glowing, talking about renovations they were planning, trips they wanted to take, the future unfolding exactly as she'd imagined. I attended her book clubs, her company events, watched her step fully into adulthood as a married woman. But something was happening underneath the surface. It was so subtle I almost didn't notice it. It started with small things. Devon's comments about what she wore. Not cruel comments exactly, but observations. Then there were the phone calls. He would call her multiple times during her workday, not because he had anything particular to say, but just to check in, to know where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. Jasmine thought it was sweet at first, a sign that he missed her, that he was thinking about her. I recognized it for what it was. Surveillance dressed up in affection. She started canceling plans with friends. She stopped going to the gym without him. She started dressing more conservatively. Her laugh, which had always been loud and unself-conscious, became smaller, more controlled. I watched this happen over the course of about a year, and I said nothing because I wasn't entirely sure what I was seeing. Mothers are supposed to trust their daughters to know if something is wrong, to reach out if they need help. We're taught not to be the interfering type, not to be the mother-in-law who criticizes the son-in-law, not to meddle in their marriage. So I kept quiet, though every instinct in my body was screaming. It happened on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd gone out to dinner with my book club. We meet once a month at a little Italian restaurant not far from my house. There were 6 of us, women in my age range, women I've known for years. We were celebrating one of our friends' birthdays, and the restaurant was warm and full of people, laughter echoing off the brick walls. I was reaching for my wine glass when I saw him. Devon, sitting in a booth across the restaurant with a woman I'd never seen before, not sitting across from her like they were business acquaintances, sitting next to her. His hand was on her thigh. They were leaning close, their heads bent together in the way people's heads bend when they're about to kiss. The moment stretched. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My brain was processing what I was seeing and rejecting it simultaneously. This was Devon, Jasmine's husband, the man I'd welcomed into our family, the man who'd promised forever in front of God and everyone we knew. He looked up then as if he felt my eyes on him, and our gazes locked across the restaurant. For a moment, something raw and honest crossed his face, not shame exactly, but calculation. He was assessing whether I was going to tell, whether I was a threat. Then he smiled, that same practiced smile, and deliberately reached down and adjusted the woman's dress, a gesture that was so possessive, so deliberately provocative, that I had to put my wine glass down before I dropped it. I didn't finish dinner. I told the girls I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. I drove home in a state of disbelief, and when I got there, I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to figure out what to do. The next day, I called Jasmine and asked her to come over for lunch. I was going to tell her what I'd seen. I was going to say it carefully, gently, but I was going to say it, because that's what mothers do. We protect our daughters, even when it's the hard thing, especially when it's the hard thing. She came around noon, bright and happy, carrying a container of salad she'd made. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had 1,000 conversations, and I took a breath and told her what I'd seen. I was at dinner last night, I said carefully, and I saw Devon, at the Italian place on Mercer Street. He was there with a woman. He had his hands on her. Jasmine's expression shifted, not the devastated look I expected, but something harder, something that looked like anger or maybe defensiveness. I wasn't mistaken. It was definitely Devon. He saw me. There could be an explanation. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was someone from work. You can't just assume. There was nothing professional about it, I said, and I could hear the desperation in my voice. She stood up. She actually stood up and walked away from the table, and when she turned back to face me, there were tears in her eyes, but they were angry tears, the kind that come from feeling betrayed. "You're trying to ruin this," she said. "You've never really accepted Devon." "I'm not making anything up. I saw—" "No," she interrupted. "I don't want to hear it. Devon loves me. He would never cheat on me. He's been nothing but good to me and to you, and you repay him by spying on him at restaurants and then coming to me with these accusations. It's cruel, Mom." I wanted to reach across the table and shake her. I wanted to make her understand that I wasn't trying to hurt her, that I was trying to save her from something I could see coming toward her like a car with no brakes. But I couldn't make her understand because she didn't want to understand. Because believing me meant admitting that the life she'd built was built on lies, and young people would rather cut off a limb than face that kind of betrayal. She left my house angry, and we didn't speak for 2 weeks. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Jasmine told me she was going to Miami for a conference. Her company was sending her and 2 colleagues to a marketing summit for 5 days. She would be back the following Sunday. She was hesitant about telling me, probably because of the tension between us, but she told me as a courtesy, the way you inform someone of your schedule. I drove her to the airport that Friday morning. We didn't talk much in the car. The radio played soft jazz, and the silence between us felt heavy with all the things we weren't saying. When we pulled up to the departure zone, she leaned over and kissed my cheek quickly, mechanically. "I'll text you when I land," she said. "Be safe," I replied, and I meant it in every language, every way a mother can mean something for her child. She left. I drove home, and then, about 3 hours later, I was in my driveway walking toward my front door when I heard my tires, or rather, I heard something wrong with my tires. I got down and looked, and there was a little fluid pooling under my car. Not a leak, something else, something deliberate. I opened my car door and tried to start the engine, and it turned over, so I thought maybe it was nothing. Maybe I'd just missed an oil change. On a Friday, so I decided to drive over to my mechanic's place about 10 minutes away. I made it about 5 minutes before something went very wrong. I was on a residential street, going about 35 miles per hour, when I pressed on the brakes and nothing happened. The pedal went all the way to the floor. For a moment, just a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I was heading toward a stop sign, and there was a car coming from the right, and I couldn't stop, and my brain was moving very slowly, like I was thinking through water. At the last second, I swerved right, up onto someone's front lawn. The car jumped a curb. I lost control, and we went sideways, and I hit a tree. I remember the sound of the impact. I remember the airbag deploying. I remember the smell of burning rubber and smoke. When the police came, I told them I thought my brakes had been tampered with. The officer looked at me with the kind of skepticism police reserve for middle-aged black women who have crazy ideas. He asked, like I'd suggested aliens had landed in my driveway. But they did get a mechanic to look at the car, and the mechanic found it. The brake line had been cut, not accidentally, not by wear and tear. Cut with a clean edge, the kind of cut that takes deliberate action with a sharp instrument. I remember the officer's expression changing. I remember him actually listening to me after that. He asked, and I thought about Devon. I thought about the look on his face when I saw him at the restaurant, that calculation in his eyes. I thought about the way he'd positioned himself in Jasmine's life, controlling her gradually, making himself indispensable, cutting her off from everyone who might give her a different version of reality. Yes, I said. I didn't tell Jasmine about the accident, not yet. She called me from Miami that night asking if I was okay, and I said I was fine, and that was a lie, but I was calculating something, trying to figure out what my next move should be. The police investigation took about a week. They checked Devon's work location, his alibi, whether he had access to my car. The problem was he lived with Jasmine, who lived 10 minutes from my house. He had every opportunity. But establishing opportunity and proving guilt are two different things. Then something else happened. Something that made me understand that this man was more dangerous than I'd initially believed. I was bathing. It was a Saturday morning about 4 days after the car accident, and I was in my bathroom with the door locked, taking a long, hot bath with lavender oil and bath salts, trying to unknot the tension that had taken up residence in my shoulders and neck. The window was frosted glass. You couldn't see in very clearly, but you could see shapes. You could see movement. I was lying in the tub, my eyes closed, trying to breathe through my anxiety about all of this, when I noticed something. A shadow, a shape pressed against the frosted glass window on the outside, perfectly still, like someone was watching, waiting, like someone was looking at me through that obscuring glass and knowing exactly what was on the other side. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. I moved very slowly, got out of the tub very carefully, and wrapped myself in a towel. Then I moved to the window and pressed my face against it, trying to see out. I could see the outline of a person, definitely a person, standing in my backyard, standing exactly where they would need to stand to look into my bathroom window. By the time I got to the back door and locked it, the person was gone. I called the police, and they came and looked around my yard, and they didn't find anything. No footprints, no evidence. But I knew with absolute certainty that it had been Devon. I called Jasmine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. When she answered, I could hear music in the background. The sound of her at brunch or somewhere social, somewhere far from my fear. Someone was in my backyard, I said without preamble. Someone was looking in my bathroom window. There was a pause. I could hear her explain something to someone else. It's my mom, she's just being dramatic. And then she came back to me. That's not possible, she said slowly. Devon, I said. Mom. And now her voice had that hardness again, that protective anger. Devon was at home, with me, all morning. He would, I said. He's stalking me, Jasmine. He's trying to kill me. First my brakes and now this. You're having a paranoid episode, she said, and those words landed like a slap. I think you should call someone, a doctor or something. She hung up. I sat in my living room in my wet towel and I cried, not from fear. I'd moved past fear, but from the terrible clarity of knowing that my daughter was choosing not to see. I spent a week thinking about what to do, and I came to the conclusion that the only way to make Jasmine understand was to show her. Not tell her, show her. I needed evidence that she couldn't argue with, couldn't rationalize away, couldn't explain as a misunderstanding. I also understood, in a way I'd been avoiding acknowledging, that I was in danger. A man who will cut your brakes and watch you bathe is a man who is capable of anything. A man like that doesn't have normal limits. A man like that is breaking down into his component parts, the predatory instincts, the obsession, the entitlement. Men like that end in violence. So I went to my son. I drove to Atlanta one weekend and I sat across from Marcus in his apartment and I told him everything. The restaurant, the car, the window. Jasmine's refusal to believe me. He listened without interrupting, his face getting darker, his hands curling into fists. We need to get evidence, I told him, and we need to do it without Devon knowing we're gathering it. We call the police, Marcus said immediately. We tell them what's happening and they can do something. They didn't believe me about the window. The brake line was cut, but without clear evidence of Devon's involvement, it's inconclusive. We need more than that. We need to show a pattern. We need to show that he's dangerous, that he's obsessed, that this isn't just one incident. Marcus didn't like it. He wanted to confront Devon, wanted to handle it the way men think they need to handle things, with confrontation, with dominance, with some kind of physical reckoning. But I made him understand that there was only one way through this, and it wasn't the easy way. I researched security systems online, and I reached out to a company that specialized in discreet surveillance. I explained carefully and without giving too many details that I was concerned about my safety at home and needed hidden cameras. The company representative, a woman who didn't ask too many questions, recommended small wireless cameras that could be disguised as air fresheners, as phone chargers, as plants. They could be synced to my phone and I could watch footage remotely. I installed them carefully over the course of 2 weekends, one in the hallway disguised as a picture frame, one in my bedroom hidden in a decorative bowl on my dresser, one in my living room in a potted plant, one in the bathroom, the most dangerous one, positioned to capture the window and the area outside it, and one, the most important one, mounted outside my house, covering the backyard where the man had stood and watched me bathe. I activated all of them, synced them to my phone, and I waited. For 3 days, nothing. The footage just showed my normal life. Me making coffee, me reading, me sitting on the couch watching television. I was beginning to wonder if I'd been wrong, if Devon had done whatever he was going to do and had moved on to something else. My phone buzzed with a motion detection alert. I opened the app with shaking hands and watched the footage streaming live from my backyard camera. And there he was, Devon, standing at my bathroom window doing exactly what he'd done before, pressing himself against the glass, perfectly still, absolutely focused. He was wearing dark clothes. He had something in his hand. I couldn't quite see what it was at first, but as he moved, I realized it was a camera. He was taking photographs of my bathroom window, of me, presumably, though I wasn't bathing at that moment. He was documenting something, collecting evidence of his own, as if he was building a case for something. I watched him for about 10 minutes before he moved away, disappearing into the darkness of my yard. I had footage of it, clear, undeniable footage of Devon Monroe stalking me outside my own home. I sent the video to Marcus immediately. Within minutes, my phone rang. "Oh my God," Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. "Oh my God." "Not yet," I said, and I was surprised at how calm I sounded. "I need to let him do it again. I need a pattern." Over the next week, Devon came to my window 3 more times. Each time, I captured it on video. Each time, he was more brazen, more focused, more predatory. On the last visit, he didn't just look in the window, he tested the lock. He tried to open it. Meanwhile, I'd asked Jasmine to help me with some home renovations, knowing she would try to convince Devon to come along, knowing that while they were here, I could observe him directly. When he was in my house, he moved like he owned it. He looked around like he was assessing it, cataloging it. He didn't make eye contact with me. He barely acknowledged my existence. It was as if, in his mind, I'd already been erased. "Your mother's house is very dated," he said to Jasmine, running his hand along my kitchen counter with a slight curl to his lip. "Maybe you should talk to her about updating." Jasmine looked at me apologetically, as if I needed to hear that my home was depressing through my son-in-law's eyes. I said nothing. I kept my phone recording everything. The breakthrough came when Jasmine had to go to a conference in New York for 3 days. She mentioned it casually while they were having dinner at my house, not knowing how carefully I'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. "I'll be gone Thursday through Sunday," she said. "It's a mandatory attendance thing for work." I watched Devon's expression change. It was subtle, just the smallest flash of something in his eyes. Opportunity, Freedom, plans crystallizing. That's fine, baby, he said, and he reached over and squeezed her hand in that possessive way he had. The moment she left on Thursday morning, I called Marcus. He's going to come tonight, I said. I can feel it. Marcus drove down from Atlanta immediately. We set up in my house, refreshing the camera feeds on our phones, waiting. But this time he didn't come alone, and he didn't come to look at the window. He came with a woman, a blonde woman I'd never seen before, and he didn't come to the window. He came directly to the front door using a key that he shouldn't have had. My daughter's key. He let himself in. We watched on the camera feeds as he moved through my house like he owned it. He walked through the living room, turned on the lights, and he sat on my couch. The woman, I realized she was the same woman from the restaurant, sat next to him, and they started kissing. I felt Marcus move to go downstairs, but I grabbed his arm. Wait, I said, we need everything. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, watching my son-in-law make out with another woman on my couch, watching him pull off her clothes, watching him reach for her in a way that was absolutely deliberate. And the whole time, I was recording. The whole time, I was gathering evidence. They moved to my bedroom. They had sex in my bed. He was loud, excited, completely unashamed. Afterward, they lay there, and he talked about Jasmine. She's so easy to control, he said, and his voice was cold, almost mechanical. Women like that, they just need to feel loved, and they'll do anything you want. She doesn't even realize that I'm using her, that she's just a stepping stone. Once I get access to her family's money, her mother's house, whatever assets she has, I'm gone. The woman laughed. Doesn't her brother live in Atlanta? We could probably… Maybe, he said. I've been thinking about how to eliminate the mother. The car thing should have worked, but she's tougher than I thought. Maybe I'll try something different. I stopped listening. I had enough, more than enough. I stopped the recording and I looked at Marcus and I saw the rage on his face. The pure, righteous anger of a man who understands that his sister is married to a predator. We go to the police, I said. The next morning, I made an appointment with the police department. I brought my phone, my laptop, external hard drives with all the footage. Detective Harris, a black woman in her 50s who listened to me without judgment, reviewed everything. She watched the clips of Devon stalking my window. She watched him testing the lock. She watched the footage of him in my house with another woman. Watched him talk about eliminating me, about using Jasmine. This is stalking, she said carefully. This is attempted breaking and entering. This is infidelity and fraud. He's married to your daughter under false pretenses. And these comments about eliminating you… She paused. I'm going to recommend we charge him with attempted homicide, based on the brake tampering combined with these statements about future attempts. They arrested Devon at his workplace the following day. It was a Friday morning and Jasmine was at work when her phone started ringing with concerned messages from colleagues asking if she was okay, if her husband had been arrested, what was going on. She called me immediately, her voice panicked and confused. My boss just asked me if I'm okay, she said. She said the police came and arrested Devon. For what? What happened? This doesn't make sense. Devon's a good man. He would never… I need you to come to my house, I said quietly. Right now, no questions. She came. She was angry when she arrived, upset and defensive, ready to fight me about whatever ridiculous accusations I'd apparently made. But I had prepared everything. I had my laptop open on the kitchen table, and I started showing her. First, the footage of Devon at the window. She watched and her face went very still. That could be someone else, she said, but her voice had no conviction. It's him, I said. Look at the scar on his hand. Look at his watch. Then I showed her the footage of him with the other woman. I watched my daughter watch her husband have sex in her mother's house. I watched her mind break the news to her heart in real time. I watched her face crumple as she began to understand that she'd been wrong, that she'd trusted the wrong person, that she'd believed the wrong person's lies over her own mother's truth. There's more, I said, and I showed her the final clip, the one where he talks about using her, eliminating me, taking her family's money. I showed her the moment when he revealed himself completely, when he admitted that everything between them had been a lie, a strategy, a calculated plan to drain her family. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just watched the screen, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked at me, there was such guilt, such anguish in her eyes that I wanted to take her pain away, but I couldn't. This was the pain that comes from learning you were wrong, and there's no way to speed through it or bypass it. You just have to live in it. I didn't listen, she whispered. I reached across the table and took her hand. No, I said, you didn't, but you listen now, and that's what matters. The trial took 6 months. The prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Okafor, was brilliant. She presented the evidence methodically, the security footage played for the jury, Devon's own words about his intentions, the medical evidence of the brake tampering, the expert testimony about stalking patterns and predatory behavior. Devon's lawyer tried to argue that the footage was inadmissible, that I'd violated his privacy by recording him without his consent. But the judge ruled that a person's reasonable expectation of privacy doesn't extend to someone who's actively stalking and trying to harm you. The footage came in. When Devon testified, and he did testify, which was a mistake, he didn't come across as charming. He came across as exactly what he was, a man so arrogant, so convinced of his own righteousness, so entitled to do whatever he wanted, that he couldn't understand why anyone was upset. He spoke about Jasmine like she was a tool he'd used and discarded. He spoke about me like I was an obstacle that needed to be removed. The jury convicted him on all counts: attempted homicide, the brakes, stalking, breaking and entering, fraud, adultery, and a series of other charges. He received a sentence of 15 years, with the possibility of parole in 10. Jasmine was in the courtroom every day. She sat next to me and sometimes she held my hand, and by the end, she'd made peace with what had happened. Not the kind of peace that erases the betrayal, but the kind that lets you keep living. After the verdict, she came home with me. Not to the apartment she'd shared with Devon, but to my house, the house that Thomas built, that I'd been protecting all this time. She slept in her childhood bedroom, and I could hear her crying some nights through the walls, and I would go to her and hold her while she processed the fact that the man she married was someone she'd never actually known. "I'm sorry," she said to me so many times in those early weeks. "I'm so sorry for not believing you. I'm sorry for choosing him over you. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing," I said gently. "You learned. That's what matters. You learned that your mother wasn't crazy or jealous or trying to control you. You learned that mothers love their daughters enough to see things other people can't see, to trust their instincts even when no one believes them." It took her a year to rebuild her life. She quit her job at the company where Devon worked, unable to face the place where she'd met him, where she'd been so young and so sure that love was supposed to feel like drowning. She found work at a different company, in a different field. She went to therapy. She slowly, carefully began to understand that marrying the wrong person doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. It makes you someone who trusted, and sometimes people betray that trust. The lesson isn't to never trust again. The lesson is to trust carefully and to listen to the people who love you. Marcus came home too for a while. He'd taken leave from his job in Atlanta to make sure I was okay, to process his own anger about what Devon had tried to do to me. We spent a lot of time on the back porch, the same porch where Thomas and I used to sit and listen to the cicadas sing the day closed. We didn't say much. We just sat there, the three of us, in the space that Thomas had left behind, and we began to understand that family is the thing that saves you. Family, the people who see your truth and don't look away, who protect you even when you don't believe you need protection, who love you enough to insist on your safety even when you're pushing them away. Jasmine and I are close again now, closer maybe than we were before. When you survive something together, when you're on opposite sides of a terrible truth and then you come back together, there's a depth to it that casual love doesn't have. She knows now that mothers aren't crazy when they sense danger. She knows that sometimes the person who loves you most sees things you can't see. She knows that trusting your mother is one of the most important things you can learn. And me? I learned that sometimes you have to break your daughter's heart to save her life. I learned that the hardest thing a mother can do is stay quiet when every instinct is screaming to protect. I learned that sometimes love means waiting for the moment when the other person is ready to understand, even if that moment takes months, even if it takes years. Devon Monroe is in prison now, in a state facility about 2 hours from Charlotte. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about what he lost, if he understands the moment when everything changed, when his plan unraveled in front of a jury who could see exactly what he was. I doubt it. Men like that don't reflect. They don't grow. They just sit in cells and convince themselves that the world has treated them unfairly, that everyone else is the problem. But that's not my story to tell anymore. My story is about survival. My story is about a mother who trusted her instincts and a daughter who learned to trust them too. My story is about the space between love and protection and how sometimes they're the same thing. My story is about coming home. This is Patricia Monroe. This is my truth. And now it's yours too.